Like most people, I have terrible habits. One I'm especially not proud of is never finishing games. I buy a game, play about half of it before hearing about a new and exciting game, then go buy it, play half of it. You get the point. The process repeats over and over. Personally, I could accept that fact, never admit it to anyone, and carry on with my life. However, my fiance called me out earlier this year. I was doing my usual purchasing of games that had come on sale on Steam, and she asked me, "What about all the other games that you bought on sale and never played?" My immediate reaction was, "What do you mean? I always play games I buy." However, after some discussion, we found out that, although sure, I do play these games, I never finish these games. We identified the issue there. I had a nasty habit of picking up games while they were on sale or when I first heard about them. I'd play the hell out of them for a few days or a few weeks before moving into the next exciting title that I'd hear about. I don't feel terrible about this because honestly I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. We've had some dry spots in gaming releases, but honestly this year there's been a lot of new titles, and it's difficult to keep up with all of them. I think one of my biggest problems to get over was I wanted to keep up with what everyone was playing at that time and not get left behind, so to speak. I realize that this is the wrong way of thinking of it. We don't have to play all the new hit releases while everyone else is. It's okay to take our time and play something that maybe is released a few years ago and enjoy that and move on to the new release when you feel ready. So with that in mind, I decided, after being viciously attacked by my fiance about wasting money on games I never finished, this year I would tackle my backlog. Today I want to cover a few games that I went back to finish, discuss why I abandoned them in the first place, cover if I enjoyed them or not, and give you a recommendation on if it's worth pulling out of your backlog, if it's there, of course. So let's get started with number 1, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. So let's first cover that I feel very embarrassed that this is even on my list. Sadly, it's true, until this year, 2025, I'd never beaten the main story of Skyrim. That hurts me to even say because Skyrim felt like such a pivotal moment in my gaming career or hobby or whatever you want to call it. The first I had ever heard of Skyrim was back in 2012, and it was on the school bus, believe it or not. I was probably 10 years old, and one of the older kids on the bus had told me that I should sit with him and talk about this game he had been playing. So that day, I got to sit in the back seat of the bus with all the cool kids and was introduced to this amazing fantasy world that really kickstarted everything for me. Now, you'll have to forgive me since it was probably 13 years ago. I distinctly remember him having a map, though, of Skyrim, and he told me about all these adventures he'd gone on in this game world, and being in the middle of this civil world, and deciding which side to align with, and as an impressionable kid, it was mesmerizing to me that you could have so much choice and adventure in a video game, and it had kind of piqued an interest because I'd always liked kind of knights and castles and some medieval fantasy stuff as a kid. I remember, at recess, playing games and stuff like that in that sort of realm, and knowing that I could maybe experience this sort of thing in a video game world in, what was known as Skyrim was kind of surreal to me. So that night, after getting off the school bus, I hopped on the family computer in the computer room and searched for Skyrim on YouTube. And I had found the trailer, watched that, and was just amazed and knew I had to play this. And I'd seen, tutorials and playthroughs and everything else that had come up with the search, and I was already hooked. I hadn't even bought the game yet, and I had convinced my mom that she had to buy this game for me, and I don't know how I convinced her to spend the money on the game, but lo and behold, I got my hands on it. Skyrim was my new obsession, and I played the heck out of that game, trying different races and classes, and seeing what build I wanted to play, exploring this massive world, and diving into this rich story. However, that was the way I played Skyrim. It was exactly that. Always a new playthrough, never focusing on the main quest, and just trying out all these different builds. I did play some side content, but I never really honed in on the main story and saw what Skyrim really had to offer. And though it, like I said, it pains me for this to have been on my list, I have heard similar stories that make me feel a bit better of this fact that other people seem to be in a similar boat. They have a similar approach to Skyrim where it's kind of run around, do side missions, cause trouble, and never focused on the main quest. In total, before it was lost to the backlog, I'd say I likely had over 100 hours in Skyrim. Yeah, I know that sounds like rookie numbers compared to some folks, but the point I'm trying to make is that I did really play Skyrim a lot, by all means. I just never beat Skyrim. Considering how many great memories I had in Skyrim, it was the first game I decided to tackle, and again, after my fiance told me that I was this terrible gamer who just needed to just get good, I thought, why not finally go back to where it all started and finish it? So I did. I'm happy to report that I completed both the main quest and Dragonborn DLC. I know there are more things to finish like Dawnguard, but the main story and Dragonborn is really what I set out to complete, and let me tell you, I loved every second of it. Honestly, even after all these years, I know the graphics, they'll feel a little dated given the age of this game, but it doesn't even matter with the number of mods that you can install to enhance the visuals. The world still felt rich with the story, full of life, and literally the only complaint I had was about the combat. Hopefully I don't offend anybody out there that maybe is in love with Skyrim's combat, but personally I felt it was a bit bland, and I feel like I went into every encounter knowing I will win, it's just a matter of how many clicks it'll take to get through this enemy, and that I didn't really have any style or skill to commit to my fighting. Now, I guess the argument could be made that I could enhance the difficulty, but honestly, that just gave the enemy more health and just increased the number of clicks to kill from, 10 to 20. All I'm trying to say is that it's an older combat system. If you go in and expecting an intuitive combat system where you're rolling all around, backflipping over the enemies, and performing these crazy moves, it's just not there. And that's fine. It works perfectly well, especially given that the story is the main driver here. You don't need to be distracted by this crazy lucrative combat system. You have the skills and all of that leveling progression that keeps a lot of people hooked. And again, knowing that most of your time is going to be spent with story and then just chunks of combat in between, I felt it was fine because I was intrigued by the story. And again, this may be only because I was running a melee build. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if I would have had a significantly different experience if I went with magic or stealth. Let me know, and maybe I can always give it another shot, but that would be my only critique. And again, it being the only critique I have does kind of showcase how much I truly enjoyed this experience. So that's it. No other complaints. The rest is pure perfection. Mainly likely nostalgia speaking there, in all honesty, but whatever. Standing there after defeating Alduin, it felt amazing, and I'm so glad I came back to it. So in short, would I recommend pulling Skyrim out of your backlog if it's there? Yes, of course I would. Why is it in your backlog? Play this game. Next up is Cyberpunk 2077. Now, this game only entered my backlog because of the technical issues that the game faced at launch. I was ready for this game. I bought it on release day, and I was even following it in its development. I was very excited. Keanu Reeves in a cyberpunk theme, futuristic game, similar to GTA and that sort of vein at least. I was so excited, and I even remember thinking that its multiplayer would be, world renowned. It would be like GTA. It would have the same popularity. I want to say that this was planned. I'll have to double check, so don't quote me on it, but I think they've now canceled the multiplayer. But nevertheless, the story is the main part of this game, of course. Even just like GTA, multiplayer almost becomes a separate game or a separate entity in a sense. But focusing in Cyberpunk 2077, I made a wholehearted attempt to play this game when it came out, and I just couldn't. I have a decent PC, and I think at that time it was before I did some upgrades, but I still should have been able to run this game, and it just was bogged down. There was so many glitches, and a lot of that had nothing to do with my PC. It was to do with the optimization, and we all know how this game launched. But it's now known for one of those games similar to, No Man's Sky, where I love how that's now kind of an expression. This game, No Man's Sky did, right? Or they did something similar to No Man's Sky. I think it's true for what CD Projekt Red did here with Cyberpunk. They had a shaky launch, and they came back to it and delivered. Yes, it did lose some people who maybe wanted it to be ready right on release. Of course, as a gamer, that is an expectation that should be met, but sometimes you have games like this where you gotta wait a little bit longer for it to be polished, and that is kind of why I didn't have my backlog. I thought, this game is broken, they're not gonna fix it, there's no chance I'm gonna be able to finish this. Well, fast forward a couple of years or however long it's been, and it was another candidate for me to try. I'd heard there was some fixes, and again, similar to Skyrim, I have little to no complaints about Cyberpunk 2077. The world is very immersive. I want to say it feels more immersive even than Skyrim does. Again, maybe that'll offend some Skyrim fans, but I think just due to the new technology that was available when this game was made compared to Skyrim, it's fair to say. I remember when playing this game, feeling like you're V, you're there in Night City, and, the world is kind of what you make of it. You can make the choices you want to make, and it really have an impact. So I felt like the biggest factor I want to call it here of what caused my enjoyment for Cyberpunk 2077 was the immersion. It's the biggest thing from this game that, of course, the story was great. And I also want to call out that I completed the DLC, which is Phantom Liberty. Super highly recommend getting that. If you haven't picked up Phantom Liberty, there could be a way to frame it that it is better than the main story. I actually did it wrong, where I completed the main game and went back and did the main story afterwards. No matter which way you end up playing it, you do have to get to the Phantom Liberty DLC. It's so great. Again, it's more of like a spy, political. Those themes are there, and it's great. Again, it really enhances and one-ups the immersion there. Some complaints, I think anything I would have complained about, they've started to address. I remember playing at the time where there wasn't, some customizability for your vehicles, and a couple patches later, they had fixed that. So, all in all, a lot of the complaints I would have had have now been addressed. So, it really does go to show what I'm talking about with this game, of how waiting a little longer, they were able to deliver on a lot of these things they said this game would be. And I'd say Cyberpunk 2077 is now where it should have been at launch, of course, but I am here for it. I'm happy that it's finally at this place where gamers can finally jump in and enjoy. So would I recommend picking up Cyberpunk 2077 from your backlog if it's in there? Absolutely, yes. You do need to give it another shot, whether that's start a fresh playthrough so you really can, kickstart that immersion again, or jumping back into an old save. I highly recommend you do it. Play through Phantom Liberty. I don't think you'll regret it. Now, when it comes to picking this up, full price, that's another discussion. This video is more about if you've already owned this game, should you jump back into it if you abandon it? I think Cyberpunk 2077 is a prime example of a game that if you've abandoned it, it's time to come back. So absolutely, this one gets my seal of approval. Gamers with it in their backlog should definitely take another look. And the final one that I have almost completed now at the time of recording is Divinity Original Sin 2. So this one definitely qualifies as a backlog. It had been in my backlog for a long time. I picked this up years ago after the Baldur's Gate 3 early access. I'd been talking to a buddy of mine, and I said, hey, what am I going to do now before they release the full game? And he said, if, Baldur's Gate 3 piqued your interest, you need to check out the Divinity series. It's made by Larian, and, you'll love it if you love this. So I remember buying it, and it was one of those situations where you buy it because it's on sale, but you don't even start it. So it wasn't a matter of, I abandoned this game. It was there. It was in the backlog. I was going to get to it. And I think it sat there for a very long time before I even made an attempt. I then did make an attempt. I don't exactly remember what happened. I didn't make it out of Fort Joy, so, it was in the early stages, but I don't know what it was, if I wasn't taking it seriously, if I wasn't trying to appreciate what this game was, but I gave it up. And I feel bad that I did, because now, having come back to Divinity Original Sin 2, this game is great. It's similar in vein to Baldur's Gate 3, of course, but I actually prefer the combat here. I don't know exactly what it is to pinpoint, but I like some of the abilities a bit more, and how you spec out your characters. It feels a little bit more customizable. I know that sounds crazy, considering, we're talking about D&D versus this rule set, but I like how it is in Divinity Original Sin 2, and maybe that is all it'll come down to, is me just saying it's my personal preference. It just is, and I love the combat a bit more. Like I said about Baldur's Gate 3, is I liked the story, and, I enjoyed the combat, but it wasn't the highlight for me. It wasn't the highlight for me. Here, I love the story, and I also love the combat. So I'm getting both there. I'm loving both of them. So I actually get excited to be in fights. I love the characters, the story, that, why we're fighting and why we're in these certain encounters. And then I love getting back to some of that story after these encounters. So again, this one, I should have never given it up. I'm not all the way through yet, so I can't give you maybe this game ends in a terrible way and it's got one of those bad endings and it ruins the whole game. I would like to wager that it doesn't, given I've heard so many good things about Divinity Original Sin 2, so much so, and I'm enjoying it so much so, that once I'm done with Original Sin 2, I'm thinking of actually going back to Divinity Original Sin, like the first game, and giving it a try. So that tells you what you need to know, and I can always post an update with my thoughts after completing the full game. So I know this section's a little shorter than, say, the Skyrim part, but I don't have a lot to say about this game. I'd say I do have one critique, that the Nameless Isle section felt a little off to me. It was a short act, and I know that it's meant to be short, and it's kind of a transition. I just would have liked to have a little more content there. I know there's probably some things I missed, and maybe I'll need to go and look into some of the things that maybe I hadn't done, but I would have liked to spend a little bit more time on the Nameless Isle, similar to what I did with Reaper's Coast. Now, Reaper's Coast is a massive chunk of this game. I don't, suspect that it would completely be a one-for-one, but a little bit more time would have felt nice. It felt rushed. I kind of completed it in one night, even trying to kind of look around for extra things to do. And I just would have liked to spend a little bit more time with the island there. So that's one complaint, but otherwise, I love everything about this. And again, I know it's a shorter section, but I'll end it off with just saying, Divinity Original Sin 2, if you like Baldur's Gate, if you're a fan of the Baldur's Gate 3 hype, if you jumped on that and you want more, Divinity Original Sin 2 is going to do it for you. It's going to kind of help scratch that Baldur's Gate theme itch, or that Dungeons & Dragons itch, and I highly recommend, if it's in your backlog, you pick it back up and play that game. It's fantastic. So with that, we come to the end of the games that I have picked back up and completed. I guess it's kind of a cheat since I haven't completed Divinity Original Sin 2 yet, but I didn't want to have to wait on holding off on this video till I finished the final act. I do plan to make more Divinity videos anyways on this channel, so I figured I'll throw it in here. But these are games I came back to and did not regret coming back to. So I hope you enjoyed this list. I do plan to kind of make addendums to this video where I go over other games I have in my backlog and when I finish them, if I regret it or not. This video obviously seems biased. I've recommended every one that I went back to. Maybe I got lucky. Maybe in a future video, there'll be a few that I say, hey, you know what? Leave it there. But honestly, a lot of this does come down to personal preference. If you're not a fan of the medieval theme, maybe you won't like Divinity or Baldur's Gate 3, and maybe it'll never even end up in your backlog, and that's fine. The whole point of this is just me trying to work through it. I had an epiphany after I was called out for not being good enough to complete all the games that I buy, so trying to make an effort to make sure I give all of them an honest playthrough, and that's where it's left me. So please consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see some of those update videos after this. I'm going to make similar content to this where review games, give my first impressions. So if any of that interests you, go ahead and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks.